that brought a very important question about where those shrubs were from, because we obviously don't have the capacity or the nursery here in the Yukon to produce these shrubs in a commercial way. And this is something important to remember, that we researchers, in the way we are working, we're not supposed to get any cash out of these technologies, right? We are being paid to generate knowledge, and the knowledge then is supposed to be free out there for nice companies to make cash out of it. And that's the case for small consulting companies in the Yukons, sometimes First Nation owned, which is even cooler. And that's the case with our next presentation and next panelists. Kristina Gardner is a registered professional forester and restoration specialist. She's also the general manager of Yukon Seed and Restoration. So welcome, Kristina, with me.
So you guys have made it. It's the last talk of geoscience. And I'm going to tell you right now that there are no graphs and there's no chemistry. So just relax. There's beautiful pictures. We're going to talk about the work that is being done by Yukon Seed and Restoration in the Yukon. We're going to step away a little bit from the straight up research roles that you've described. And these folks are amazing. Thank you for doing tiny bits of studies of minute statistical details. And thankfully, there's none of that in this talk. Just one last plug for being incredibly appreciative for being in this fabulous traditional territory. I took a friend from the south on a walk last night, and she just kept running around going, "It's so pretty," which was just beautiful and just so lovely to be reminded that we work, live, and play in such an incredible place. We're so blessed. So YSR has a revegetation process which is designed as a wheel, and it's a wheel because it's iterative. And your mining project, for those of you who are still here, might go around this wheel a few times as your project changes or as you address different components of disturbance at your site. So what I'm going to talk about in this few minutes is just what Yukon Seed and Restoration has been doing in work around this wheel. So we're going to start with site assessment and go all the way around to monitoring and maintenance, and just tell you a little bit about what Yukon Seed and Restoration has been doing, the work that we're doing in active restoration here in Yukon. So to start out, we were really pleased to work with Newmont at the Coffee Gold site this summer. We were doing, God, it's distracting with this. We didn't have this all week. To do site reconnaissance and native plant population assessments at Coffee Gold. We looked at some progressive reclamation that Coffee's already doing, so kudos to Coffee at some of their unused exploration roads. So you can see the picture on the left is road restoration work. We created some prescriptions for other places that hadn't yet had restoration done, and are building our knowledge base for the population in native plants for native plant restoration strategy development, which is our next step with Coffee. So here's a non-mining example. We were lucky to be working in the Ethel Lake area, which is part of the heart and soul of the Nacho Den, doing ecological landscape classification for the Indigenous Forestry Initiative. We were doing your classic sort of biological, biophysical classification of the landscape, but there's an added twist to it because we're a First Nation partnership company, and that's incorporating traditional knowledge into the classification system so that the Nacho Den can consider the information from both ways of knowing to use in land use planning and in restoration prioritization. Oh my God. Well, that was the end. So you get to go home now. Okay. But not yet. We were super pleased to work with the Casino Mining Corporation at site, doing seed collection and testing, sort of working, again, going around our wheel. We did site reconnaissance and plant population assessments just like we did at Coffee, but we went the next step, and that was working with the folks at Casino to actually collect seeds to support their future trial work and restoration planning. So we collected paper birch seeds and juniper seeds, as you can see here, and we have processed those at site and are banking those for casino's use in future. And all of that information that we collected at site is being used in another native plant restoration strategy, which we're working on for casinos so that they can, again, plan restoration in the future considering locally sourced native plants. So moving around the wheel into trials, we were happy to work with Victoria Gold this year. There's 2 slides on Victoria Gold, so don't get too excited about this one. But this was looking at some very simple trial work that they did at Victoria Gold. We were pleased to get there before the place burnt down and working around all kinds of other constraints. And in all seriousness, really pleased to be able to have access to the site in such a trying year. You know, we still had that prioritized work to be done, even though there were folks coming and going, there was fires on the hillsides, and we were still there making sure that the plant community was doing well, which is just incredible prioritization. Anyway, what you can see a little bit in these pictures, they're not fabulous with the projector, but you can see a bit of variation between the two. There's 2 sites that got established just with locally collected native seed placed in 1 meter squares with buffers in between them. And you can see there's quite a bit of variation in between the 2 plots of how things are growing. And you see that because of probably a bunch of factors. But this is a super compacted till site. They haven't done any lovely fences and they haven't done any micro topography changes. They just went and seeded it. Let's see how it goes. And you can see that what we found was that the yarrow and wheatgrass that were seeded have done pretty well. They've seeded in pretty well. But we also had Altai fescue, which I think was, no, it was Mountain Avens you used. And it hasn't done really well at all. So that's just interesting stuff to consider as far as what might play well together in restoration in a like completely untouched, compacted till area. But the point I was going to make before I sidetracked myself was that there's a lot of variability in the results even between these 2 plots, and that might be because of slope position, aspect, a million other reasons. So the underlying message with that is that ecology is complicated, and it's really, really tough to narrow in from a research perspective to get the answer that you want. But in a practical application on your site, it means that you have to try lots of stuff in lots of places because lots can happen. And you can have a year where it all burns and you're like, back to square one. We were pleased to work at Mount Nansen this summer as well, looking at the revegetation trials that they have there for the restoration project. It's a much more complicated restoration trial. It works with microtopography development, so a rough and loose microtopography where they took an excavator and actually like dug up big scoops to make like a super hummocky, hard to walk on area for the plants. And the trial is looking at staked willow and balsam poplar, but also planted spruce seedlings, scrub birch seedlings, Labrador tea seedlings, and blueberry seedlings. Some of those plants were chosen by the First Nation. So like ordinarily I would not be advocating for planting Labrador tea in a mine site without any kind of protection. Like you need those island communities, generally understood, that Ben's studying, to protect plants like that. But you know what? It's crazy. They're growing. I was shocked. So we'll have to do some number crunching, but some of the preliminary stuff that we have found is that the lower microsites where there's dips and hollows are places where the plants are protected, and we're seeing that there's a lot more success in those spots. There's way less growing and thriving and love and life at the tops of the peaks of the microtopography that's been created. And some of the analysis we haven't yet done is that we've looked at variable fertilizer amounts and variable biochar amounts. So there's all kinds of like unpacking. I might have to touch Ben for some good old statistics to help us out. But there's exciting news about how things are going. One more just little sidebar for those of you who've been looking at these pictures and they're like, well, the ones in the middle don't look so good. Well, that's because some of the trials were placed in high metals areas at the site. And the areas are higher than the reclamation goals for the site. And that was just because of what was available, right? There's only so much flat ground that you can put a trial in where they're not actually planning to do something with it. But what we're finding is just an interesting little result, which is that some of them, like, they're not doing great. They're not like, this is my best life ever, I love metals. But some are doing okay. And they're doing a bit better than I had thought when I looked at this in the first place. So that's great news, and we're really hoping to see how the results trend, assuming that they continue to hire us, of course. So moving up to Snowline, the star of this conference, we have been happy to be working with Snowline for the last 3 years with YSR, and that's just to give a tiny plug, amazing for them to have engaged with us at such an early stage, and we're so thankful that to be able to help them build this piece of the project together with a long time to work together on what might work at their site and how to plan for dealing with interim disturbance, but also how to plan for like the ultimate disturbance once they have a mine, and lots of fun things happen up there. What we did this year was we looked at the first year of a seed trial in just disturbed areas around the airport. But as I think it was Catherine who said, sometimes it's hard to get like a machine to a place, right? This is a fly-in spot. So we had folks who were like there with their shovels, like making microtopography with a shovel. And you can see in the results, well, it's hard to see with the pictures, but what the results show is that even that little bit of microtopography where there's dips and hollows just from the shovel work, there's better seed growth in the first year. The first year is super early stages, so we'll have to see how things go. But the other noteworthy piece of information from this is they seeded scrub birch, alpine sagewort, and mountain avens. Mountain avens is the one that Ben's using as a seedling. And what we found was the alpine sagewort is the only one that came in. The mountain avens, they're just not there yet, or not going to be there. We don't know. And the scrub birch didn't come back from seed, but from the roots of the disturbed plants that are around them. So there's all kinds of ways to grow plants, and it doesn't have to be seeds, although we, like seeds as a company, but there's lots of kinds of ways to do it, and lots of ways to see how to make success happen at your site. So just the last point before I move on with this one, here we are, year one. Our percent cover was 2.5%. So think about that. You've got your restoration plan for your mine site, and you're like, yep, we're gonna seed it. It's gonna be great. I'm not gonna think about it anymore. Well, it's going to take a while to get enough plants from seed to grow to be your reforested or revegetated area, so that everybody comes to look at your site and goes, oh, that's a good one. So just think about that in your planning, because it takes a while to do all of this, plus it takes a while to collect the seeds to do it for a larger area. Okay, rolling around the wheel, we're almost done. This is a non-mining example, as you can see, but we were pushing the season. It was really cold. And we did a little installation project along the Mayo River where we installed live staking of willow and balsam poplar, and also bare root transplants of balsam poplar. So we went and found seedlings, dug them up, and planted them. And just a tiny note, that's a ton of work. So Catherine's study where they did the transplanting of the big patches over time, that's epic amounts of work. So part of what we're trying to do at YSR is to find solutions that are operationally feasible to recommend to you. We would love to do stuff like that, and maybe we can, or maybe we have to in really important places. But anyways, this is a study that we did, or not a study because we're not necessarily researchers all the time anyway. But some interesting notes about this particular, interesting notes about this particular installation was that installing live stakes in frozen ground is really hard. And there's a lot of differences between these two sites. One of them is a very heavily compacted till, and the other one is a more typical forested soil that's not compacted, has a lot of coarse woody debris. And it was way easier to do the application in actual soil as opposed to compacted till. And so we're looking forward to going back in the summer to see if that makes a difference to how much survival or thriving we have in the plants. And I personally have my votes, but we'll see what happens. Mother Nature is pretty tricksy. Oh, I lied, one more. Okay, so back at Victoria Gold. We were also thrilled to be at Victoria Gold to continue with their environmental monitoring, surveillance, and adaptive management program for terrestrial environments. They do that every year. They've done it since the mine was started. What we did up there was assessed plant communities and did foliar analysis, so collected leaves of things, and soil analysis. And what Victoria Gold are trying to do is see if anything about the mine operation is making metals worse in the plant or soil community around the mine. So that's where this, like the broad strokes of what this study is. So they've got these 5 pre-established sites. We went to go collect the data and that did the monitoring. It was beautiful. And we are completing an annual report for Victoria Gold right now to report on that and to support the years of data that are being collected that maybe somebody will crunch into a great big analysis someday. So just to conclude, our next steps in reforestation at YSR are to continue advocating for starting early on your projects and to use best practices in reforestation using locally sourced native plants. It's delightful to use native plants, but it's really good if you can source them locally because, as Pat sort of alluded to, they do really way better if you get them local. They know where they want to grow and they're good at it. We want to expand baseline studies with our clients so that everybody knows what they've got and what they should be planning on doing about it. We want to advocate for having more trials so that beautiful restoration plans can be made real, made good on the land to see if like, oh yeah, okay, this is gonna work, we got this. Or, oof, that was hard, maybe we should do something different. We wanna roll training into all the aspects of the work that we do. I talked about that ad nauseum yesterday, and we're gonna continue to advocate for working with your community to know what success looks like, because it's one thing to say, yeah, I made this and it was beautiful and we liked it, and the community to say, nuh-uh, and starting over at that late stage is pretty challenging. So having an end goal that everyone agrees on, it's the best part. So, thank you for listening to all of us this afternoon. Go home. Oh, sorry.
We'd like to close out in the right way, so I would like to, before everyone leaves, invite former Grand Chief Ruth Massey up here to give us the closing prayer.
Good afternoon. As the chair of the Ta'an Christian Elders Council, I hope all of our visitors have had a good visit with us and around Whitehorse. I know I have witnessed many friendships bonding and many colleagues working their magic in business. I want to close in a good way, so let us pray. O great Spirit, our Creator, we praise you for the wonderful week you have provided us. We are feeling very blessed, Creator, for all you have provided this week. Thank you for the animals, the birds, the fish, the clean air we breathe, and our good water we drink, and of course, the good food shared this week. We ask you to please keep your hands upon the ones less fortunate than us and keep them out of harm's way. We also ask you to continue to be with our visitors as they make their way home, and we wish for safe travel for all. Shonithan, amen.
And on that note, I want to let you know the wonderful Takini River Ranch does have a lot of extra food, so please do not go home empty-handed. Go by the kitchen, grab some food, and you can make your way home. I just wanted to say thank you to C3, who was incredible, as well as the Kwanladang Cultural AV team. This was an incredible, thank you guys, really. Big round of applause. And of course, Yukon Government, Yukon Geological Survey, and Economic Development. Thank you for making this agenda what it was.